In typical fashion, I will be reviewing the lesson before I go right to the style of the homework questions. I want to review everything that we learned so that this serves as good review for you for the future. Now, first thing we started off with was drawing a basic sketch of sine of theta between 0 and 2 pi. Now, sine goes up from the midline, so it starts at the midline, it goes up above pi over 2, comes down at pi, is at its minimum at 3 pi over 2, and comes back to the midline again for 2 pi. That's the shape of the sine function. Cosine starts up at the top, at the maximum. It comes down to the midline for pi over 2. It goes below the midline to the minimum at pi. At 3 pi over 2, it finds itself back on the midline again. And then at 2 pi, it's at the maximum. Now the maximum and the minimum in both of these cases are 1 and -1 because these are the basic sine functions, the parent functions. What we're going to be working on, though, is we're going to be working on some transformations of those functions, and I would like to go over questions 3 and 4. We did these in class, but just a reminder of why we got what we got. If I want to graph these, the first thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need axes. So every time I start one of these questions, I'm going to draw my own axes. I'll make those in black. This is my y-axis, and this will be my midline. I'm not going to draw the x-axis because the x-axis doesn't really matter to me. What I need is I need the midline, which in this case, this is going to be the midline, is going to be positive 4. Now, remember that these are broken up from 0 to 2 pi, meaning that the middle is 1 pi, so we'd try pi. This line is going to be 1/2 pi, which is pi over 2. And this is going to be 1.5 pi, which we write as 3 pi over 2. I know the cosine function starts up high. It comes down and it hits the midline. It goes to its minimum at pi, comes back up, and then ends up at the maximum again. So this basic cosine function looks like this. Throw some arrows on the end. Now, I used y equals 4 as the midline, but I also need to use this 3 here. This 3 is what we call the amplitude. So that means that from here to here is going to be up 3, and from here to here is going to be down 3. So 4 plus 3 is 7, and 4 minus 3 is 1. So that's my maximum and minimum, and that's a full credit graph. Now let's do one for sine. I'm going to need axes again. So I'll draw those on. That'll be my y. Here will be my x, or my midline. My midline is going to be y equals -3. Sine is going to look a little different from 0 to 2 pi. I'm going to label this up. It doesn't matter how perfectly you do so. Sine is going to start on the midline. It goes up first and reaches the midline again. Then it goes down and comes back to the midline. So sine essentially looks like this. I'll throw some arrows in the end because these functions all continue. And now remember that I need to go up 5. It's this number right here. Up 5 and down 5 because that is the amplitude. So if I go up 5, let's see, starting at the midline, -3 plus 5 is 2. And -3 minus 5 is -8. And that's a full credit graph. Now, what we're doing for homework is we're doing something a little different. We're adding in frequency. We're adding in frequency, and what frequency is it's how many full cycles occur from 0 to 2 pi or from 0 to 360. Now, we'll be doing it in terms of pi because we are dealing in radian measure, so from 0 to 2 pi. And we just need to know what a full cycle looks like. So let me pick 2 of these questions, and I'll show you how to go through them. I'll pick question number 13. I know that we did this in class, and then I'll do one sine function, and then we can call it a day. Your paper, this might be a little too small to just zoom in on, but I can zoom, so I'm going to do so. Okay, here's my function. I know a couple things about this. I know that this line is going to be y equals -3. That's important. I know that cosine starts up high, and what is that value? It's going to be -3 plus 5. That's the amplitude. So if I start at -3 and I go -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so this is going to be +2. I'm also going to have to go down 5. So -4, -5, -6, -7, -8. Of course, because -3 minus 5 would be -8. Now a cosine function starts up high. Cosine function starts up high. I need, in this case, to complete 3 cycles, because this is what we call the frequency. I need to complete 3 cycles. So here's one cycle of cosine. Right, because cosine. It goes down, it's the minimum, which is probably a little more specific, and then comes back up to the top. That's one cycle. Looks like a U. Now let's do another cycle. Down to the minimum, and back up. And one more in blue. Down to the minimum, and back up. Now the definition of cosine, or the definition of frequency rather, says how many full cycles occur from 0 to 2 pi. So I need to make sure that I label my midline here. My midline needs to be labeled from 0, that looks about right, to 2 pi. And that's how long it took to complete 1, 2, 3 full cycles. Okay. So you get the midline right, you get the maximum and the minimum, and you draw the correct number of cycles. Let's do one for sine. So let's pick question number 20. I guess I'd rather do 22. It's a little more intricate. Let's do 22. I need my axes first. I know that this line is going to be y equals 5, because the positive 5 in the end, that's the midline. I know that my amplitude is going to be 4. So that means that I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's going to be 9. 6, 7, 8, 9. If I go down 4, I'm going to go 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's 1. Now, how many full cycles do I need? I need 2 cycles, because that's the frequency. So what does a sine function cycle look like? It goes up, it's the maximum, and then it comes down and hits the minimum, and that's about right. My second part should probably go down a little bit lower. And we need one more. Up to the maximum, down to the minimum, and back to the midline. Now this is the distance that it took, right? From here to here. That's the distance that it took to complete 2 full cycles. So when I label this, this line is going to be 2 pi. I could even, if I was drawing this in pencil, I could even erase the rest of this because I don't need it, because I only need it from 0 to 2 pi. Just make sure that you don't arbitrarily label the end of the line as 2 pi, because it's the end of where the 2 cycles complete that should be 2 pi. Okay, I hope that helped. You could always go back and rewatch it again, or you could contact me with any questions, or catch me tomorrow in class. Have a good night.